Hello everyone. So my name is Satyam Raha, and this video is basically a continuation of the last video, which was on interface. So in this video, I'll talk about the updates which were uh, added to the interfaces from JDK 9. Okay, JDK 9 and JDK 8. So what are those? The first very important one is default method. So what is a default method? It will seem like the definition of the traditional interface has changed when they have included the default methods. So basically, default methods uh, were included or were actually implemented in an interface from JDK 8. And what it meant is we can have some body implementation of our default method in an interface. Let's see an example. So say void uh, fun. So we could not have any body to this method, right? Because these were made as abstract by default, right? But from JDK 9, what they said is they included this. We can write this, right? From now, everything has changed. So we can have like any body to this method. uh this welcome, say welcome to JDK 8 maybe. Okay, now the interfaces can have um the default methods which can have body, right? So you see, uh why was it included? Why was not it included? The main idea of interface was to stop that, or to like implement multiple inheritance, to solve multiple inheritance problem, right? That is why they made the methods as abstract by default. But now why did they include default methods? That is a question, right? So let me explain it with a very simple, maybe a real life example, although it doesn't work like that in reality. But I will try to explain it in as simple words, or as with simple examples, so that you can understand the concept. Okay, focus on the concept, not the example. So uh, think of a functionality in iOS, for example. Say iOS 16 is released, for example. Right now maybe we are using iOS 15. Okay, forget about iOS. We are mostly Android users, so let's talk about Android users, right? So let's say I'm using Android 12, for example. Okay, maybe you are using Android 11, maybe someone else is using Android 10. Okay, all below Android 12, right? So the highest release of Android is Android 12 right now. Android 13 is will be shortly released, for example. Now think that the developers are actually going to implement something. We have a slider, right? From the top we bring it down. That slider, in that slider, suppose they want to include a new functionality which will show the current GPS location. Okay, latitude, longitude, maybe. For example, they want to show it right there on the slider. If we slide it down, so it could show that particular information, for example. So uh, maybe there is an interface which is very popular and which is used to the core, means this is used by all the operating systems, earlier operating systems, the current operating systems, and the newer operating system will also be using a very popular interface. For example, the name of the interface is slider, for example. Now that particular functionality has to be added to the interface, right? So that all the newer versions of the of that particular operating system could use that, right? You can say that maybe I could simply include that particular method. Say for example, uh, okay, let's delete this. Let's make it very simple to understand. Okay, let's delete it. Let's say there is a very popular interface called a slider. Okay, now it will have some functionality. For example, okay, let's delete it. Okay, so let's say we have many functionalities, say void x. Okay, sorry, I cannot have this. Say void y. Okay, so these are the functionalities it already has. Okay, now say any operating system, say class A, actually implements slider. Okay, since slider is very common, very popular. Okay, so let's say class A actually implements it. So obviously this class A has to like, okay, public void x, it must have its own definition, right? And public void y. Okay, so likewise, so let's say I have another class like this. Let me just copy and paste it, and let's make it class B. And let's say I have another class, just to ensure that this particular interface is very famous, okay, among all the different operating systems, say A, B, C, and other Android versions, say 10, 11, 12, for example. Okay, and by the way, my phone has an Android version of 9 or 10, I think. So I do not have an Android 12, but let's say you have Android 12, and there will be some functionalities, and you see all these operating systems are actually implementing a very popular interface, which is slider, right? Now suppose I'm going to say like release a new operating system whose name is, say, D. Okay, now this D operating system wants to include a new functionality which will have some GPS information on the slider itself, right? So you might say I would simply add that functionality here. For example, maybe void GPS, maybe like this. So it will work fine, no issue. But the question is, in the next versions of Android, let's say I'll have some Android E, right? Android E, maybe some Android F, maybe some Android G, all those version, I'll have to again uh, like use this, write this specifically, right? Or the problem is, I'll have to write it. That is not an issue. But what if in the next versions I want to delete it? I want to remove it. So how do I solve this issue? How do I solve this problem? I want to have it in the slider, right? Because this is a new functionality which is common to the slider. So what I should do is, by default, I should simply write here GPS, because it will be common in the next versions. So I like to implement it in the, I like to include it in the interface slider, right? So maybe like this. And now what happens? Now this particular version D, for example, let's delete E, is useless. Let's say in this particular version D, I'm implementing void GPS. Okay, so public void GPS. So I have implemented something. Okay, I have implemented this GPS system in the new operating system, and since it will be used or mandatorily used in the next versions. Okay, focus. Okay, so it, since this particular functionality will be present, will be mandatorily present in the next versions of the operating systems, for example class E, class F, class G, all should have the GPS. That's why I must write GPS here in the interface, right? Otherwise I'll not be able to make sure of it, isn't it? that the next versions will also have GPS. Since I want to ensure that this GPS system should be present in all the next versions of the operating system of the Android, I must write it in the slider itself, isn't it? Maybe some of you didn't understand. Let me delete it from here and let me have a public GPS here. Now suppose I have a next class, which is class say E, and now I do not have a definition of void GPS. Okay, still it works, right? But I do not want to make this happen. I want to ensure that in all the subsequent versions, GPS must be there. Must be there. When I use the word must, I must write it here. I must write it here. This makes it abstract, and this moreover it makes it compulsory for all the implementer class to implement it. I must implement it here for the newer versions, right? Okay, so for the newer versions, I get it. That is fine. I'm bound to implement GPS. That is fine. So I'll just implement it here. Sorry, again, sorry, public void GPS, and yeah, I have implemented it, and it will work, right? For example, say from these new Android versions, I am the developer, so I'll be implementing the GPS. I'll write the code in this particular functionality, and I keep on improving it. So this basically this name in the interface, make sure that I implement it in all the newer versions of the operating system, right? So I'll make sure it's fine. I'll just I'll print the GPS value here. That is fine. In the next version, maybe I'll update this functionality with some something extra. Maybe I'll make some animations and all that. So it works fine. But what about those operating systems which were released already earlier? Can I change it? Can I include or implement the GPS method there? Can I do it? I cannot, because those were already released. I cannot update those operating systems, right? Those phones which are using those, like for example, my phone, which is Asus Zenfone 5 5Z. So it's on Android 10, for example, and I do not have the functionality. For example, when you call someone, a video of them, animated video can actually shows on the screen. I do not have that functionality. I think that is in Android 12. Now, to get that functionality, my phone has to get updated to Android 12. But can it be updated in Android 10? No, it cannot be done. Moreover, my phone doesn't support more than Android 10. So what do I do now? Now, since the interface slider, which is also common to me, got updated, now entire code breaks. My code will not work. See, there is a bug in my phone, my operating system. There is a bug now. What is the bug? The bug is that this GPS, which is there in the slider, which is added to the slider, must be implemented in my class, in my operating system. It must be implemented, but I do not have any option. What can I do? It's already released by the developer. It is passed. So how do I solve this problem? This problem can be solved by having a default version of GPS. So I can write it like this. Maybe I'll just write it like this. So class A doesn't need to do anything. Class B, say Android 10 doesn't need to do anything. Android 11 doesn't have to do anything. Android 13 doesn't have to do anything. Yes, Android 14, they can define its own version. Maybe it can like have something say 82 L, maybe 23. What should I forgot what it how it looks like, but let's say like this, latitude longitude maybe, for example. Okay, and in the next versions from E or from Android 13 14 or whatever it is, maybe they would like to have something uh, more beautiful, for example. Okay, and maybe like this. So 82L comma maybe like this. Okay, 23L, for example, like this. Okay, just to make it very clear, let's say like this. So in, and let's change it. I think you'll better understand it, right? Android, say this is 14. Okay, let's copy it. Let's say this is Android 13. Let's say this is 12. Let's say this is 11, and let's say this is 10. Okay, just I'm keeping Android 10. It is old, I know, but my phone is Android 10, so why not keep it? So you see, Android 10 doesn't have the GPS facility, Android 11 doesn't have the facility, 12 doesn't have the facility, but 13 has the facility. So from there on, all the Androids must have the GPS facility, but without breaking the earlier versions. Okay, the earlier versions will work fine. That is why the default methods were added to the interfaces. I hope you understood the concept, why it was used, and that is very important. Now you see, the next question which may come to your mind is, we are like uh, changing the definition of interfaces, because the interfaces were not actually meant to have the method definitions, right? But we are breaking that. But you see, still there are 2 points which needs to be accounted. In case of class can have some information or some state information, right? That is the objects. Through objects it can hold some information, right? Some data. But interfaces still cannot do that. Interfaces cannot hold some data, right? It cannot like have any objects. Still now we have to create objects of the class which implements an interface. We cannot directly create objects of an interface or instantiate an interface. So these two differences are still there, and they are the main differences when it comes to classes and interfaces, right? So I hope you understood, and my battery is also low. Okay, so very quickly I will cover another concept, which is from JDK 9 itself. They have also included one more concept, um, which is static methods. Okay, so you can have static methods in an interface. For example, you have to write it like this: static maybe void. I'm using void just for simplicity. You can have any data type, return type, that's not an issue. The static void maybe all, for example, right? And let's write default value maybe, and maybe I'm return, okay, not running, let's print it out. Android maybe, right? So you see the difference, or the specialty of a static method is we can still have some body here of a static method in interface when it's in an interface. The thing is that we do not require uh, this interface to be implemented by a class in order to use the static method. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is I can simply write here maybe a string. Okay, let's not write string, let's print something. Sys out. So suppose I simply want to use this method and nothing else. Simply I want to use this method and nothing else from this interface. So otherwise it was not possible. Why? Because if I had to use any of these methods, what I would have to use, I would have to implement through a class. I would have to implement slider using some class and then create the object of that class. But suppose I do not want that. I want simply to call this method. Can I do it? Yes. Because this is static, I do not need to create, or I do not need to implement this interface. And with extension, I do not need to instantiate any object of that particular class. I do not need to do anything. Okay. All the overrides are nullified. We do not do anything. We do not need to do anything. We simply can call the default value. Okay. How? Like this. Default value, but default value cannot be accessed directly, so you need to write the interface name, um, which is slider, right? So I'll simply write slider dot default value. Okay, so the name is slider dot default value. Yes, it is, I think it is correct. What is the error? Resolved or is not a field. Is the spelling wrong? Okay, sorry, this is a function, right? This is a method. Okay, so now what is the error? The method print in the type print stream is not applicable for the arguments. Okay, okay, okay. So I cannot print this. I can simply call it because I have not returned anything, right? Okay, so it should work fine. So if I, okay, sorry, if I execute this code, Android is printed, you see. Oops. Okay, so they have done something. Do not focus on that. So Android is printed, right? So you see, this is how the default methods work. Okay, another thing they have included from JDK 9, I suppose, that is the private methods. And you can have some private methods like private void GPS, like that, but it is not much used, not much popular till now. So you can like avoid it for now. You can like not use it for now. Okay, but if you really like to understand what a private method is when it comes to interface, you can check the book by Herbert Schilt, I think from 10th 11th version, maybe 11th version, they have included the private methods, but it is not that important, and that's why I'm not going to discuss about that. It is not much used till now. Okay, it is just a functionality. um, so you can simply write private here and it can be used like this, private. Okay, so it is also allowed. You can have body of that method. So these three methods, these three not implementation, what should I use, these three functionalities were added to the interface from starting from JDK 8, and they can all allow some body implementation to the methods. But you should understand why is it used. Personally, I haven't used the private method or any of these methods till now, but uh, default and static methods are popularly used from JDK 9. And I hope you understood it, right? But talking about private methods, I don't think it is used much till now, and I don't really know its functionality or its applications till now. It is in theory, maybe it is theoretically implemented, but in practical I do not see any area where it can be implemented or it can be used. That's why I'm not explaining with any example. In future, if I like find some good applications of that private methods in interface, I'll be explaining it. I'll be adding it to this video. Okay, so I hope you understood what interface is and how it actually works, right? So one more thing I would like to just add, a simple thing that is I forgot in the first video, is you do not need to have all methods here. Okay, you can simply also have some variables, no issue. Okay, this should work. So when you write like this works as some constants. Okay, you can have like this. And what happens is, what is the use of this? Basically, when you implement this particular interface, what happens is all the constants, these are constants, right? These are static and final. So these constants are available to the scope of this class. So you can use it like some constants. Okay, So in this way also it can be used. The interfaces can be, it's not mandatory that you have to define some methods or you can have to write some abstract methods in a interface. It's not like that. You can keep it empty, you can have simply variables, or you can have simply methods. That's fine. Okay, so I hope you understood. That's all about interfaces for now. If something adds, some updates are there, I will add it to this video. Okay, thank you.